So I've been working on this spooky sewer area for my game. It's an interconnected Metroidvania kind of area, but is missing something. I want to create 3 mini bosses and different challenges in between each of them. And then I want to go just absolutely crazy with the mechanics in a final boss battle. So my game starts in this overworld area, which is more of an open-ended sandbox where you can kill huge numbers of monsters and even craft automated structures to help you train and get stronger. But what is all this preparation for? Well, you'll find that the overworld is only part of the game. The real challenge is when you find your way into this dark, dangerous underworld. The underworld will be split into regions, each with a specific theme. So the first region is the sewer under the town of Piokou, and it's occupied by one of the main villains of the story who possesses the heavenly scroll of creation. So the theme of this first region is creation. And in terms of mechanics, that would mean creating just ridiculous numbers of projectiles and summons. But before we get to that, we need to just start simple, just to kind of introduce the concept. So, of course, the most obvious basic idea to introduce this projectile theme would be a mouse that throws a boomerang at you and then surfs away. Something cool about projectiles is that they move through space over time with a predictable path, unlike a melee attack that happens in a single moment and position, where you don't really know exactly what the attack will look like until it happens. So this projectile theme creates these reactive battles where you can kind of just show up and have a genuine chance of defeating it on your first try, since you don't need to learn any attack patterns. Also, since the projectiles persist, I can stack up different simple projectiles that will interact in complex ways. Like this mouse will throw back this boomerang, and even though it's off screen, I know it's coming back soon. But there's also these projectiles passing through, so now I need to weave through these while also keeping in mind the boomerang, so I'm ready to jump over it. And you kind of just react to these things. So these battles are found deep within this interconnected sewer area. So actually getting to the boss itself is part of the battle, because along the way you'll encounter obstacles, like this dark area that needs to be lit up with torches. My lighting system is very simple. It uses something called surfaces. A surface is basically like a separate off-screen canvas that you can draw on. It's kind of like constructing an image off-screen, and then you can take that image as a whole and draw it back on the main screen in whatever way you want. So for basic lighting, we start by filling the surface with black. We can then make use of something called blend mode, which controls how new drawings combine with what's already there. So for this, we'll use the subtract blend mode, which makes it so anything we draw over this black surface will remove color from it instead of adding to it. So if I could just make a sprite of a light source, I can draw that over the black surface, and it'll basically cut out that image from the blackness. So now all we do is draw that darkness surface over the main screen. I use the same kind of idea in the overworld for some things like shadows and darkness at night. But for shadows, you'll notice that the darkness only affects these foreground assets and not the background. This is also done with surfaces. I can draw all the foreground assets on one surface, draw all the shadows with lights through them on another surface, and then I can draw the shadow surface onto the asset surface. And it looks like shit because I need to use another blend mode. This time we'll use one where the opacity of the shadow surface matches the opacity of the asset surface. And that way, the shadow is drawn here but not here. And now we have this merged asset layer with shadows and lights, and we just draw that over the background on the main screen. But darkness is just one obstacle you'll find in the sewer. You'll encounter some other areas that are just dangerous, like a pit of sleeping monsters or a cluster of a bunch of hazards. So I want to create some more open-ended structures that you can use to pass through these kind of things safely. One way to pass through these things is to just literally blast yourself through it. You can craft these water cannon things that shoot you and give you invincibility while you're moving. I had this idea of a smoke screen also, which would make you invincible in an area and then disperse when you attack. But I feel like it mostly had the same purpose as the cannon, since you just use it to pass through a dangerous area. So for this next boss, we can increase the complexity a bit now that the basic projectile theme was established. I want to keep using this idea of stacking simple mechanics that interact with each other. We'll start with just a stationary guy, and then this freaky ass boss starts spitting bombs at him. But if the boss isn't moving, then you don't really have an incentive to move either. So we'll now introduce the concept of summons as part of the theme of creation. I like using summons like as this extra thing that you need to take care of, and if you neglect it, they just build up and become overwhelming. So now you have to fight the boss here, but regularly take care of these guys before they build up and overwhelm you. But it's pretty easy to just pass through here back and forth, so we'll add these giant randomly falling fish eggs. So obviously we just choose random spots along the x-axis to drop the projectiles, right? Well, now we just end up with these crazy clusters of balls and uneven distributions. The thing is, true randomness tends to feel non-random. We intuitively expect that something random would have no patterns or clusters, but in reality, randomness often does end up with these little patterns and clusters. just randomly. So we need to fake the randomness to avoid clusters that are literally impossible to survive. There's a lot of ways you can handle this, but what I did was I split up the x-axis into slots. At each time interval, we just pick a random slot to drop at and then mark that slot as used. We repeat that until all slots are used and then reset the markings. But it's not a fully random selection. We alternate between picking slots from the left half and the right half. This, along with the time delay in between each drop, means the projectiles are pretty evenly spread out, and in most cases, there's some way to survive. So this actually ends up feeling a lot more random and fair than just choosing random dropping points. Okay, I feel like if we're doing a projectile themed boss, then of course we have to do something with like bullet hell patterns. That's kind of like the most extreme case of projectiles, so it's perfect for this last mini boss battle. I'm going to stick to just 2 patterns that increase in difficulty as the battle goes on. So the spiral pattern forces you to move around the boss, and you can try to get a few hits in as you go. But actually I decided to increase the spacing between the bullets because now you have the option of also passing in between them. It's a riskier option, but I didn't like that you had no choice but to just follow around in a circle. I like when battles have more open options with different levels of risk. And then there's also the scattered pattern, which doesn't make you move in any particular way, but you just need to dodge them. I like that with these patterns, the closer you are to the boss, the harder it is to dodge them, but you're rewarded for staying close because when the pattern stops, you're already in attacking range, so you'll have a longer window to deal damage. But bullet hell patterns get really interesting when you combine them and they synergize. So now you have to move around in a circle while also dodging the scattered bullets. But a big difference with my game compared to like an actual bullet hell is that in bullet hells you can literally fly. Mobility is pretty limited here with like gravity and shit. So I added these booster things down here for more movement options, and you can just use them like if you get trapped in a corner. So at this point, we're in the deep, scary parts of the sewer, where you're gonna find much more difficult monsters that are very rewarding to kill. There's actually a pretty big issue with the nether structure system I mentioned before. Like, you're walking through here and you see this obstacle and you're telling me I gotta go back, gather the materials for the item to craft it, and then use it to pass through this thing just to kill the boss and never come back here again. It's just like too much thinking and work when I could just get my stats good enough so that I can just pass through here without caring about taking a little bit of damage. So this idea of coming down to the deep parts of the sewer to train regularly actually makes the structures a lot more useful. So you can create a safe path that allows you to get down here as quickly and with as much health as possible so that you can survive for longer and then benefit more from training here every day. And this creates a pretty cool endgame training loop for this current version of the game. You can build up a nice automated farm, like set up these fans to gather these guys down here into a blender, drop some bombs for some extra damage, and then we'll set up a barrel roller here to pick up these guys, transport them with the portal to get to these guys too, and maybe throw in this turret for a little extra damage. And now while that gathers money and materials for you, you can venture down to the good training spots deep in the sewer for optimal EXP and the chance to get some strong, rare equips. It even actually makes these underworld structures more useful because now you can use them within your training area to optimize it. When you kill one of these hard monsters, you can see their respawn timer and location. So now I can create a path through their spawn area to get between their spawn locations quickly. And when you get really strong, you can even craft this spawn enhancer that makes the monsters in the room respawn faster. So finally, we've messed around with a few different ideas around this theme of creation, and now we can just go extreme and just blast a shit ton of projectiles and summons. Not only that, but I'm thinking this boss itself is basically a collection of summons. So there's different components, and each of them is responsible for a different set of projectiles that all work together to make it feel like you're being attacked from every direction at all times. But just like the other stationary boss, we need a reason for the player to move around between components. So we make each component charge up before summoning a stupid number of monsters. But we'll have to adjust the mechanics here a bit to make that work, because normally minions deal touch damage to the player, but obviously this shit is not gonna work here because good luck dodging any of this. So we need a different challenge here that changes the way you're being attacked. So instead, the minions don't deal touch damage, but there's a hidden timer, and if you don't kill them in time, well... And then for phase 2 of the battle, we take it even further with more summons. Bro, I might need to optimize this shit, bro. I hope it doesn't lag for anybody. But maybe the lag is just a boss mechanic, I don't know. Oh yeah, you probably noticed that some of this stuff is still pretty rough. Like especially this guy and a bunch of other things as well. Well, the game has gone so big that it's just taking me a really long time to clean everything up, and I've had to learn to prioritize where to focus my effort. So for now, some of the stuff is just gonna have to look kind of shitty because my priority right now is more about the overall flow and feeling of the game as opposed to like polishing up the details. I'm gonna start up the closed alpha very soon and then kind of adjust what I work on based on feedback on the alpha. Because, you know, I would like to clean up all this stuff before the early access release, but I also would like to move forward with more new content. This is just the first nether region I have planned, and it's pretty simple since it's just meant to introduce the concept of the underworld and its balance with the overworld. But the other regions will have more interesting themes that I'm excited to work on. But yeah, you can wishlist Yuma Nest on Steam for when it's ready to play soon. Also, I had to change the name again. Okay, I promise this is the final name. Unless...